Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Nieuwenkamp. I'm the chair of the OECD Working Party on Responsible Business Conduct. I'm the chair of the committee of the OECD that oversees the work on corporate responsibility. And I'm honored to speak at your seminar. A couple of months ago, I wrote a blog about living wages, and I started that story with the tale of Ai Yin Mon from Myanmar. She fled from the cyclone, and she started working in a garment factory. And she mentioned that her base wages were so low, so extremely low, that she had to do extreme overtime to make a living. And as she said, she had to work like an animal, and there was nowhere to go. And millions of people like her are trapped in poverty. And many family members they have to feed, and they have either to compensate this by overtime or by falling into debt, which then often turns into forced labor. I will give an international perspective on this topic, mainly from the point of view of the OECD Guidelines for Multinational Enterprises. But I will also refer to the specific due diligence guidance of the OECD for the garment industry, which is, for the living wage topic, a very important one. So to start with the OECD Guidelines, this is the most comprehensive and most important international standard on living wages too. It's not only dealing with environment, labor, human rights, etc., but it specifically focuses on living wages. It's not so well known. 47 governments have made a multilateral agreement which is hybrid of nature. So it's legally binding for governments, which is quite unique. They have a commitment to promote the guidelines and to set up a complaints mechanism. And it's not legally binding for businesses. However, it's morally binding. So it's a quite hybrid system. And as I said, there is a unique complaints mechanism attached to this. And so this is also a complaints mechanism for the issue of living wages. And the system is called the National Contact Point System for Responsible Business Conduct. I will give 3 key messages, because I don't like to keep you looking at the video for too long. 3 key messages. First of all, this system is truly global. So our complaints mechanism since 2011 is linked to global value chains. So that's why we can have cases regarding the cotton industry from Uzbekistan in the United Kingdom National Contact Point, because a UK company is buying cotton from Uzbekistan. That's why we can have issues about freedom of association in India, in the garment factory, in the Netherlands National Contact Point, because the Dutch brand is buying from this factory. That's why we have dealt with several cases related to Rana Plaza in Bangladesh, because the brands are buying from were buying from Rana Plaza. And there have also been cases related to wages in supply chains. And the second key message is that in 2011, in the revision of the guidelines, in the negotiations, we embedded the issue of living wages in the guidelines. So this is now indeed a global mechanism for living wages. So what we say is that companies have to find the best possible wages that should at least be adequate to satisfy the basic needs of workers and their families. Basically the language copied one-on-one from the ILO norms in this field. But importantly, linked to the supply chain responsibility in the guidelines that were also embedded in 2011, this makes it also a system that looks at supply chain responsibilities vis-à-vis living wages in the supply chains. And as you probably know, in supply chain responsibility, there's one key term, that's due diligence. Due diligence in supply chains is the name of the game. Basically, that has 3 main elements. First of all, you have to identify the risks. In this case, what's wrong with the wages, what's good with the wages in the supply chain. Then you have to prevent or mitigate the adverse or the negative impacts. And third of all, you have to be accountable for how you have addressed these negative impacts. In this case, what have you done when you found that your suppliers were not paying a living wage? So those three elements are key. And then as a third key message, as you probably all know, living wages are a human right too. According to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it is a living wage. And so we don't have only the labor chapter where specific mention is made of the living wages issue, but we also have a human rights chapter which also says that you have to do due diligence on your human rights impact. In other words, our human rights chapter of the OECD Guidelines, as well as the UN Guiding Principles for the business and human rights, they're saying the same thing. And as there is such strong links to living wages in the OECD Guidelines, it's only a matter of time that there will be complaints about the living wage issue in supply chains. And we know that many companies are trying their best to work on living wages in their supply chains, but there are thousands that basically are in violation of the OECD Guidelines and the UN Guiding Principles in this respect. Well, the good news is there good practice? Well, I would say yes, there is. And I think it's important to stress that we have to say goodbye to the neo-colonial audit system. And I was in a panel a couple of months ago in India where people said, well, this is all the Western brands telling our poor people in India and in the rest of Southeast Asia what to do. Well, we have to leave that model alone. So that's why we also say that the brands in the OECD countries, that they have to do their own due diligence on their own purchasing practices, including price setting and including what it means for wages. So they have to look at their own practices, not only to say, well, these factories are not doing well, but they have to look at how they themselves influence wages. So for example, sometimes the brands are asking the factories to get paid later. So they ask credit from their factories. In turn, the factories are paying the wages later. So if you look at this from a holistic point of view, basically the poor workers are giving credit indirectly to the multinationals, which is incredible. So looking at purchasing practices is more and more becoming the standard. The good thing as well is that there's now concrete guidance in the guidance of the OECD for due diligence in the garment and footwear supply chains, very concrete guidance on the living wage topic. And I would recommend looking at Module 7 of that due diligence guidance. In all of this, apart from due diligence, trying to tackle this issue, working together is key. Because if you don't work together and you try to do something on living wages, it's indeed bad for the economy. So you have to work together. Else it's destroying individual companies. It would put people and put businesses out of jobs almost immediately. So working together is key. And there are good examples. I think the best out there is an initiative called ACT. That's a collaborative global framework on living wages. That's a group of companies that are really trying to influence also the wage levels and to work together in getting a living wage in specifically Asia. But also another good initiative is that I would like to mention is the Malawi Tea Revitalization Program. So that is a couple of companies that are taking the lead, which is really good. However, the OECD governments would say there are 80,000 multinationals out there. So if maybe 50 are taking a lead here, there are still thousands and thousands of companies that have to follow. So this action needs a dramatic scaling up and speeding up of the efforts. So in other words, are living wages bad for the economy? I would say no. It's very good for the economy. And the brands have to make sure that their suppliers are paying this living wage. So they should not squeeze their suppliers. They should make sure that they earn a living wage. And actually that's very good for the economy, because then the purchasing power is rising and the people get out of the poverty trap. Thanks very much.